Hello everyone. It's me, Arden Lee. I am back with another video today. And in today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about how to break out of the freeze response. This question was from one of the members of the Repatterning Parlor, which is the free Facebook group that I moderate. And she's asking about in situations where she is being verbally attacked, what she can do to switch from allowing the other person to control the conversation by asking questions that put her on the defensive, and how she can switch to being able to shut down the conversation in a way that enforces her needs and her boundaries. So we're gonna talk about that today. If you're not yet familiar with my work, my name is Arden Lee, and I'm the creator of the Repatterning Project, which is an 8-week course where we hack our beliefs and we examine all of our patterns that have been unconsciously ingrained in us through childhood trauma, through social conditioning, through all of the formative experiences that have led up cumulatively to define our behavior today, and we examine them and we decide which ones are serving us and which ones are not working out for us in our favor. And then we can bring conscious awareness to making newer choices on a daily basis. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, go ahead and check out the description box where I have left a link to a free PDF guide about the Repatterning Project so you can learn about what it is that we do. And I also have a link to the Repatterning Parlor, which is the free Facebook group that I just mentioned that I moderate, and that is full of like-minded individuals who are also looking to receive support and learn ways that they can start to hack their own beliefs and change their patterns and start to gain more conscious control over the results that they're getting in their lives. So we'd love to have you come and join us. We'd love to welcome you into the fold. And of course, as always, I would love to invite you to subscribe to my channel and or like my page, depending on where you are viewing this video. So all right, so let's get into a little bit about the freeze response. So for those of you who don't know, there are 4 fairly well-known documented responses to traumatic stimuli in the moment. We're very familiar usually with fight or flight. And there are 2 other responses called freeze and fawn. Fight, obviously, it's, we probably know that one already, but I'll go over it anyway. Fight is when we feel that urge to fight back. We feel threatened, and so we want to fight back. We want to become aggressive in order to intimidate the person that we feel is threatening us. Flight is like we run. We just want to get out of the situation. We completely avoid it. We run as fast as possible. We just get out of there. Freeze, on the other hand, is what happens when we freeze up and we don't know what action to take. So we don't take any at all. Sometimes we may dissociate. We may almost sort of mentally leave the situation a little bit in order for our mental faculties to protect us from the trauma that we're experiencing, which is designed to aid in our survival, but doesn't actually help us in the moment to navigate that situation with conscious awareness, because everything in our body and our system is being put on hold, so we can sort of suspend our participation in what's occurring. And the 4th response is fawn. And fawn is essentially, it's also known as tend and befriend. And what fawn means is that when we see or sense a threat to our physical safety or even our emotional safety, then we respond by trying to be pleasing to that person, trying to communicate subordination or submission or subservience, trying to be pleasing, so that that's also, of course, a coping mechanism, because we want them to keep us safe. If I laugh, or if I giggle, or if I'm cute or whatever, if I fawn over you, then that's going to keep me safe, because you're going to see me as not being a threat, and then you're not going to want to threaten me. And there's also a 5th response called the faint response, where someone loses memory of the situation, or blacks out, or dissociates entirely to the point of even not, potentially being able to remember what happened. So So that's a quick rundown of trauma responses. And essentially, what this person asked in the parlor was, how can she overcome her trauma response so that she can have an even keeled, level-headed response to the kind of verbal attacks that she is facing. And this is how they get us, right? What happens is, if someone is looking to attack you or twist a narrative or somehow make something your fault, what they're going to do is they're going to ask questions that put you on the defensive, as she described in her situation. They're going to start saying, well, why did you do this? Why did you do that? They're going to turn it around on you and try to make it your fault. We've been over this concept in a couple of the other videos that have talked about the behavior of narcissists, right? Or the behaviors that signify emotional abuse. So the first thing that we want to be able to do to get back control of the situation is to recognize that there is a problem with us freezing. So it sounds like if you're already asking that question, you're in a pretty good place because you recognize that there's an issue. Because over time, and this in my experience goes for any learned pattern response, whether it's a trauma response or whether it's another pattern, whatever behavioral pattern you're looking at, you can start to decrease your turnaround time to making a different choice than the one that you are accustomed to making by bringing more conscious awareness to the situation. So you may be in a conversation and you may freeze, or you may go on the defensive, or you may not know what to say. And because your stress levels are so heightened at that time, it might not even occur to you in the moment that that's what's going on. And 10 minutes after the conversation is finished, you might be like, oh my goodness, I just froze again. And now I understand what happened. I went on the defensive. I started, allowing the conversation to be twisted. I didn't enforce my boundaries. Instead, I just, I fell for it again. I allowed the conversation to be directed at me in a way that felt harmful to me. And I want to watch how I say that, because of course, by saying, I allowed it, it doesn't mean it's our fault. It doesn't mean that that person is not 100% responsible for their behavior, especially if they're being emotionally abusive. But we also want to start controlling our response to this behavior, because we can only control our responses. And even I say that a little carefully, because of course, if we're having a trauma response, there is a biological current that we were bucking in many, many cases. So for example, our bodies are freezing because this is biologically, partly biological and partly our conditioning, what we have learned to do to survive. And if we want to start making a different choice, we're going to have to bring that conscious awareness, because on so many levels, it's not necessarily a choice how we initially respond. It is something that our bodies are conditioned to do. However, since we can only control our half of the equation, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to empower us to feel better in those situations and to feel more in control. So the first thing we want to do is bring that conscious awareness to it. And if it takes, a while before you realize what's happened, just realize that that's normal, and aim each time to just decrease your turnaround time. Maybe the next time it happens, you realize at the end of the conversation before you walk away from that person. And then the next time it happens, you realize maybe halfway through, and you can bring some conscious awareness and say, oh wait, this is that thing that I said I didn't want to do anymore. I didn't want to allow the conversation to be turned around and twisted on me like this. I'm just going to say, you know what? I'm not having this conversation with you. This is not healthy, and I have a boundary here, and this is not okay. So this person actually said that they made up a list of possible responses, which is really, really great, because you can have those responses ready to go when you sit down, and if you have to be in a conversation with that person, then you can know what words, what kind of language is going to start to empower you more. So, for example, you crossed a boundary and I wasn't okay with that. In the future, I'm not going to tolerate this kind of behavior. I'm letting you know this up front, so we are clear on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Finally, that's not the conversation we're having. Let's come back to the topic. Let's not change the subject. Whatever it is. Well, we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about this. This is the conversation that we're having, and I have not agreed. I have not agreed to be party to the other things that you're talking about right now. So whatever helps you be more prepared for that situation is going to be really, really key. Another thing about, in general, being more responsive to immediate stimuli like that is to start actually practicing having more immediate responses to things in your entire life. So, for example, when your alarm clock goes off in the morning, do you get up right away and start doing things? If you have to jump into a pool of cold water, for example, are you willing to just go, I'm going to do it right now, right? Because I'll let you know, and this is something that I've read elsewhere as a potential long-term solution for arming yourself against the freeze response is just to become a more immediately responsive person. And if this is something that you want to work on in your life overall, so that you have that capacity to not freeze in any situation, then absolutely, it may be worth it to develop a practice where you take cold showers in the morning and you just hop right in. And as someone who has cultivated that behavior in herself, or had cultivated that behavior through much of my life, where I just didn't allow fear to come up for me and to be a part of the equation. I would just dive in because I wanted to get something done. I can absolutely say that helped me to deal with things like street harassment, things like people approaching me or talking to me or touching me inappropriately in bar or restaurant situations. I'm at a point in my life right now where if someone is approaching me in a harassing manner, that I can pretty immediately tell them, no, don't touch me, this is not acceptable, walk away from me right now. And I owe a lot of that to my willingness to immediately respond to things, even if they're a little bit uncomfortable. So I'm putting that out there as a potential practice, that if this is really something that you want to change your overall bodily response to, practicing becoming a more immediately responsive person in the moment is absolutely going to help you do that. And the other thing I want to stress, of course, is that ultimately we want to get our lives to a point where we are not surrounded by people who are constantly triggering our trauma responses. So the overall zoomed out view of this question is, how often is this happening? Is it happening with the same person or the same few people? Or does it seem to be happening over and over and over again with new people in your life? And I would need more information to do a really deep dive on this. Naturally, I only have the information that I'm going off of from this person's comment that they left in the parlor about having this particular issue and wanting this resolved. But if it's one particular person, then you want to look at the futility of continuing to try to establish boundaries with one person. And ultimately, there are going to be those people that we have a really hard time getting out of our lives, such as sometimes family members, if we don't feel ready to cut them off, if we feel like there are other obligations that are keeping us in that relationship. Our bosses, for example, in this time of what is really a lot of great economic scarcity, if we are working with people, our bosses are our coworkers, I understand not everyone has the luxury of immediately cutting off a professional relationship if they are economically dependent on their job. Now, we can certainly start to set an intention to call in newer and safer work environments, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to arm ourselves with the skills to cope in our current situation until we can get to that better place. So I understand all of that. But if it's one of those things that's happening again and again and again and again with different people, in the comment, this person joked that she was thinking about bringing a sign on dates and just saying, I think like, okay, please leave, or something. I forget exactly what it said in the comments. But if this is something that is happening over and over and over again to you, then at some point you're going to want to look at some of the underlying patterns that you have for choosing the people that you surround yourself with, for what was perhaps set as normal, quote unquote, when you were growing up, what you have been taught to tolerate. Because I have found in my experience that so often our social circles will fall to our lowest common denominator of what we are willing to put up with. And I've been in a lot of situations before where I really felt like I was surrounded by horrible people to the point where I really thought, I really truly believed, just like the evidence in front of me was just, the world is awful. Everyone in it treats people horribly. That has to be the case because I keep getting treated horribly no matter how much I try to be valuable or be pleasing to people or be kind to people. I try to bring integrity into my relationships. I try to treat people with kindness. If anything, I'm probably overly generous, and yet I still keep getting treated badly. So therefore, the world must just be full of awful people. And the truth was, that whole time, yeah, obviously there are a lot of awful people in the world. We see it in the news every day. But the other thing that was really a factor was that I didn't have good standards for how I allowed myself to be treated. And so the people I surrounded myself with fell to that lowest common denominator because I didn't know how to walk away from people who couldn't treat me any better. I thought that if I were just better, if I were just more pleasing, if I were just somehow maybe more successful or prettier or whatever, then maybe people would start treating me better. So I fell into this pattern of overachievement, and I would just do things and do things and do things and hope that it would earn people's respect for me. And it didn't. It didn't work that way. The only thing that did was really consciously zooming in on what qualities in people actually made for healthy friendships and relationships, and making sure to surround myself with those people, and making sure that when someone came in and treated me in a lower vibrational manner than I wanted to deal with, then I didn't stand for that kind of relationship. And ultimately, I let go of the need to explain myself. I let go of any attachment to what they thought of me, and I just moved on and started making better friends. So it's something that is worth looking at. If it's coming up over and over again, it's worth looking at what kind of behavior was modeled to me when I was growing up. How did people treat me then? Do I really need to repattern and rewire all the things that I think I know about the way that relationships work? Because it really can look like everyone in the world is just an asshole. And I've been there. I've absolutely been there. I have, for sure, teetered on the brink of suicide, not because I hated myself, but because I couldn't make sense of a world that treated me worse and worse and worse the more valuable I tried to be. And at the end of the day, it was because I didn't know that I was capable of really discerning who I gave my energy to. And I didn't have any evidence that people out there like that existed. And I set an intention, and I said, I really need some better friends. I need better lovers. I need to up level. I need to upgrade. And it doesn't happen overnight, but it certainly did happen for me in the long run. So you really want to start breaking out of that pattern of feeling like you need to defend yourself or explain yourself to people who obviously don't care about you. That's going to be really key to this pattern no longer happening. Because what happens is that people who can turn a conversation around on you and put you on the defensive, if it works, they'll keep doing it. And if it works, you're holding on to that attachment to that person rather than saying, I'm not okay with being treated like this, so I'll see you later. You don't even have to say, I'm not okay with being treated like this. You can just walk away. You can just decide, that you don't owe that person an explanation, because you don't. There have been plenty of friendships, former friendships in my life that I've left. And I'm sure those people have a completely different idea in their minds of what actually went down. And they're making up all kinds of stories about me in their heads that don't resonate with me at all, but I don't care. Because if people are making up stories and projecting things onto me that don't resonate with me and aren't giving me a chance to show up as myself and to hold space for that, then I don't care. People are going to do that anyway. I don't need to be giving those people my energy. So call those cords back, those attachments that you have to people seeing you the way that you see yourself, the way that you perceive the situation. It's just never going to work. So you want to let go of being in that model of needing to defend yourself, because ultimately you want to surround yourself with people that you don't need to defend yourself to. And of course, as we know, what we focus on increases. So if you are always defending yourself, if you are getting into conversations, getting roped into conversations where you are constantly on the defensive, and you allow your energy to be pulled to that place where you are continuing to defend yourself, then that is eventually going to increase. Now, the good news is we can absolutely turn that around. We just have to bring that mindfulness to our pattern of defending ourselves and realize sooner and sooner and sooner into the interaction that we're doing it, and finally saying, you know what, I don't owe you an explanation. I'm just not a yes to being in this conversation with you. This is not the way that I want to be treated, so bye. And you want to start focusing on building a model of positive treatment that is what you want for yourself. You want to start focusing on, who do I have in my life who really shows up for me and holds me in a space of compassion and empathy? What qualities do I want to see more of in my social circles around me? And start putting your focus on those relationships and on cultivating more and more relationships that look like those relationships. Because eventually we want to get you to the place where you're not dealing with this problem at all. Yeah, you might encounter, a random jerk or two who might try and do that, have that same dynamic, might try and force that same dynamic on you in a conversation. But by that point, it will be so far from your reality that you'll just be like, what? That's silly. Because truth be told, when people who are trying to emotionally manipulate you realize that their tactics aren't going to work on you, they tend to move on pretty quickly. So we want to arm ourselves to make sure that we're as unsusceptible as possible to those tactics, knowing that of course we're not to blame for them, but also wanting to bring our power back to ourselves so that we don't have to engage with them. So I hope this was helpful, and it definitely is going to serve everyone who's really facing this problem on a chronic basis, to really start looking at the quality of their friendships and relationships and start to focus more on those positive models that you do want to see, and detach your energy from those negative models that are bringing all of those trauma responses into your life in the first place. It's probably a much larger topic that I can address in one video, and this one's gone pretty long as it is. So I'll save that for another day. But it is definitely something to think about and something to consider. And if you're interested in going a little bit deeper on that, I do encourage you to check out the Repatterning Project, which is an 8-week incubator where we can really get deep and really start to examine and bring all of that conscious attention to our patterns, so we can start to make choices that help us to create better lives for ourselves, so we can be happier and more fulfilled, which is probably the best intention that I can possibly think of. So thank you guys. I'll see you in the next video.